And I just want to talk to you this afternoon really about the fact that I think one of the real challenges and one of the real struggles we've got in the North American church right now, as we struggle to get it, is we have too many church planters. Just wanted the tweeters to have something to say. That's it. That is the headline. McNeil says, too many church planters at the church planting conference. The truth is, we do have too many church planters. Because when I hear people talk to me all over the country, they say, I feel called to plant a church. I usually say, I doubt it. Because they just gave me a big tip by what they said, a church. I want to give you a very sophisticated diagram that lets you know if you get it or not. And basically, it's how we've looked at our culture over the last, I don't know, upteen dozen centuries now. And it's as we think of our culture in terms of domains. So we have like the political arena, and we've got the education, and we've got health care, and we've got social services, and we've got the business community, and then you've got arts or whatever else. And guess what the church's response was to this? What did we do? We built our own silo. And we thought, if we will just build this right, they will come. If we just get a really sexy sax player, they will come. No, we need an executive chef. They will come. I will come. And so what we did is so when we plant a church, we plant one of these suckers. We plant a pot, and now we got to fill it. And so we try to pull stuff from over here and get people to come over here, or we launch missiles out of our silo over into theirs. And we basically think this is how we're going to change the culture if we get, I grew up with this church-centric view that if we had great churches, we would have great communities. I grew up hearing stuff like the local church is the hope of the world. I believe this stuff because I grew up in that church-centric deal that just said, if we can get enough of these suckers planted, we'll change our, come on. We keep planting churches. A church. Now let me mess with you as if I haven't yet. Because you see, if you don't get it, this looks perfectly normal. If you don't get it, then all of our effort is how do we put the worship team together, and how do we get land, and how we're going to organize around, and are we going to let women talk or not, and all of this stupid stuff, dumb, stupid stuff. And then we set up all these metrics to measure how the box is doing. With all these church-centrics, how many showed up at the box? And how many came to support? And come on. Missional followers of Jesus, and incarnational, I should add. All right, if you want missional and incarnational followers of Jesus, church planters don't look at our culture like this. We understand that the church runs this way. The church is already deployed across all these domains of culture. We're already there. It's a matter not of getting this right. This is Tower of Babel building. Come and get in this and we'll lead you to heaven. You can just work with us. We're building our way to heaven. We're showing what the kingdom looks like by the kind of smoke we have here in our worship services. We're doing, come on, we can do better than this. God keeps knocking the top off this sucker, and we keep building it higher. Instead, if you want to plant not a church, plant the church. Now we got something to talk about. So here's what happens. It's about releasing the church to be the church right where it already is if you want to be the church planter. It's about finding both politicians in America that are Christians and releasing them. I know I'm being generous, but I'm just, what it means is those of you who get it, name of this session, are going to be thinking more of church as network, not church as thing. You know, church is a who, not a what. Church is deployed, not just, gathered, all that stuff. In fact, those of you who get it understand that missional and incarnational followers of Jesus think of church as a verb. It's a way of being in the world, not a something I go to. I church at work. I church at school, wherever that was. I church in my business. I church at church. I church at home. It's just I'm here today to speak on behalf of the other millions that are never going to accommodate their life rhythms. Either they will not or cannot accommodate their life rhythms to match our congregational modality of church, which has been the only way we have assigned church to show up in our culture. It's going to take you who are willing to go say, we're going to go figure out how to be network church like this, how to be missional and incarnational people of God in a city. It's going to take people like you, quite honestly, to connect with folks that are never going to come to us. I guess I'm arguing, don't plot all of your efforts on how to plot your efforts on how we're going to begin to knit together people who are already out there. In the story of the Good Samaritan, it's an interesting story, isn't it? Because it's told to really beat up church people. Because the bottom line is when Jesus is pushed to the wall and he has to say, tell us what the most important thing we ought to be doing, he said, you need to plant churches. This will sweep this. Are you kidding? Church grows out of a movement, not the other way around. We still keep thinking we're going to start a movement by planting churches. What part of this do we not get? It's as we are the church flows. But in the parable, the Good Samaritan said, Jesus said, I have to love God and love your neighbor. Well, what does that look like? Well, I'll tell you. And then he tells a story, Everybody in that parable met their scorecard. The priest thanked God that night that he'd been able to resist the temptation of helping that guy out so he could go fulfill his priestly duties. Went to sleep with a clear conscience. The Levite thanked God that he didn't get discombobulated on the way to his church meeting. He made it on time, because he didn't stop to help somebody. Everybody in the parable meets. It's only the Samaritan that has God's scorecard, not the church people. Can we hear Jesus, challenging us to this? Changing your scorecard is going to be one of the two big things you've got to do to make it happen. That's why stories about changed communities like we just saw. That's why hearing about reducing the crime in that part of Sydney. This is why having the courage to lift our metrics off of our church-centric activity and have the courage. And one of the churches, congregations that are in the Missional Renaissance Leadership Community, one of our groups there in Dallas, they've just, to your point, Michael, they've just adopted the poorest part. They don't use that word. They've decided to serve is the word. The poorest part of their city. It's a 25-year commitment. Let me tell you some of the new metrics. Crime rates going down. Graduation rates going up. Gang participation going down. Families in our church that live in that neighborhood going up. See, it just changes everything once you shift the metrics to another kind, to a quality of life. Because after all, isn't that what Jesus promised? I've come to give you church and give it to you more abundantly. What if he was telling the truth? And what if kingdom metrics are life metrics and have nothing to do or little to do with all the stuff we're knocking ourselves out trying to accomplish? I suspect that if you move from a church-centric view to a kingdom-centric view, it'll cause you to change your scorecard, and that in itself will push people to the new behaviors, because what we celebrate gets done. I told the earlier group in a workshop today, what we make a big deal out of is what people do. Listen, and people will do what we make a big deal out of. What gets celebrated gets done. Just stop and think what we make a big deal out of in our church. What you make a big deal out of in your church is what's going to happen more and more and more. Change the scorecard. Second thing, and only two, I only think of two things. To change your culture. If you get it, what do you have to do to shift? Change the scorecard. Secondly, you got to change your language. Now, I understand there's a whole bunch of things underneath changing language, but language creates culture. Language reflects culture, but also creates culture. You have to begin to watch what you say. This is very difficult because, by the way, what you say speaks out of the mental maps. This drives you to say things that this doesn't. This drives you to never say things that this should. All of that plays in. For instance, to talk about the church, not a church. Huge, huge language shift. Or to be able to tell people, what is our job? We are the people of God. What does that mean? Well, we've stepped into a particular meta-narrative that is a storyline, not the only storyline, but is a storyline that we are a part of how God is interfacing the world. We are to be, from Genesis 12:4, people of blessing. Never rescinded, the covenant never goes away. When Jesus is talking about loving your neighbor, it's just our neighbor. This is a way of blessing the world. He just gets it a little more incarnational and close up at hand. So to talk to our folks and to talk about ourselves as we are people of blessing allows people that are serving out here, like that mayor, where's the political, like the mayor in one of our church groups said, I didn't know that my service as mayor counted. Are you kidding? Why would we ever want him to leave what he's doing in his position of influence to come down and ush or teach or eld or deek? We need him to may. Changing church to a verb. But let me tell you what the newest micro expression is. And many of you know this already, and it's been brought up here, but I'm just want to encourage this because I think it's a brand new life form in the taxonomy of the church, and it is the missional community. Now, you may not call it that. I don't care what you call it. But I'm not talking about a small group on steroids. I'm not talking about a house church. In America particularly, and I'm not against house, but it's different from house. What happens in house church is we automatically go back to thinking categories of church. So when do we worship? When do we have fellowship? When do we have teaching? When do we have... Are you kidding? The missional community just emerges around a sense of being missional and incarnational together. All that other stuff of how we worship, how we study, how we fellowship, how we serve, all that develops out of doing and being church together. It's a different engine that drives it. And it's much more free for you to explore. And so what I'm seeing is the emergence of these missional communities that really fall into kind of a couple of three groups. And I want you to explore this as you think about how you, as the missional strategist, not a church planter, but the church planter, how would we be, how would we, all right. We see missional communities, some of which emerge as a community, and the community is the missionary. So we live in a part of town, we live in a neighborhood, we are going to live on mission together as the missionary to this neighborhood, incarnationally, missionally. That's one way it's manifesting. There's another way it's manifesting, and that is a community of missionaries, where the community comes together to support each member of this that already is deployed in a very meaningful position of influence or whatever else, like a social worker who's 80 hours a week, 70 hours a week, on mission in the hospital, or a lobbyist for the big, or like in my mission, an attorney, a senior partner, managing 3 offices in 2 different states. And how can he be the influence of Christian with the people that he works? All right. So a community that supports people who are on mission. And then, of course, there's the hybrid, which mixes these up somehow. What I'm suggesting is that if you want to plant the church, that you begin to strategize about how you could plant a network or realize a network of missional communities across the city in every crack and crevice of culture, as Al likes to talk about. How you would galvanize the existing church community to serve the community through what Michael's talking about, listening to the community, being there, how do we serve? And I think if we can move to this kind of agenda and quit talking about planting a church, planting the church, then we have a chance at helping to answer Jesus' prayer that the kingdom would come. He didn't teach us to pray, thy church come, because we're not the destination. The kingdom is. In fact, in the book of the Revelation, there is no church in the city. It's not accidental. It's because the church is ubiquitous. Because God is with his people. And it is that image that Jesus invites us to pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, just like it is in heaven. And the image of that heavenly city has no church that stands out separate from all the activities of that city. And so I invite us to pray together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Slowly, thy kingdom come.